Okay, so part number 2 with Aaron from Broccoli Bus. Today we're going to be centering more on building a bus, but in Aaron's particular situation, he built a bus for 6 people.
Yeah.
So we're kind of going to go into that and just kind of riff on things we've learned if somebody's thinking about building a bus for a family, and also I'll be throwing in some input about what I learned from building my bus. So my first question is, what was the initial idea with going with the school bus? Did you look at RVs first? Did you have experience with any campers? How did that come about?
I didn't have any experience with any RVs at all. The only, now, American RVs. I think we had a lot of other stuff, other things going in play over the years. Let's see. That was around 2014 was when we bought the bus. My wife Amanda and I, we kicked around ideas on how to change our lives a bit and settled on the bus idea pretty much that year, maybe a little before that. But at the time I had just opened up a shop with my business partner, converting Unimogs, so getting them imported, retailing them, holding them on the lot in inventory, and building them out and selling them. I had built several trucks in the past, conversions like that. Unimogs, they tend to transform once they get into the United States. They either become crazy off-road rigs, they become just general beater delivery truck sort of things, or they tend to turn into travel mobiles, travel rigs, and when they do that, they get the cool camper box on them and stuff like that. So I helped convert several of those and build those around. And then I had previous experience for a little while in the marine industry, working with a boat company that was out in Bremerton, Washington. And we were building boats. And I got a lot of exposure there to the electrical side of things and the design and training and just all that stuff that sort of revolves around there. I was never by any means a marine electrician or anything like that, but just hung around a lot of smart, talented people there and sort of floated around all sorts of different areas in that space doing work until I got out of there.
So why did the bus come about? What was the reasoning to go the bus route? Where did you see a bus converted and you're like, I want to do that? Did you kind of float around the idea of RVs?
I think part of it was, like I said, Amanda, my wife, she liked the idea of a Skoolie conversion. Hey, it's a cheap vehicle that you can invest into and build it out into what you want. And at the time, it was sort of catching on as a neat thing, like in social media circles and stuff. It wasn't nearly as popular as it is now, five years later.
Absolutely.
But we weren't the first to build a Skoolie. Let's put it that way. They've been, as long as school buses have existed, people turn them into houses. It's like as long as cars have existed, people build hot rods. It's the same thing. So there was a Skoolie.net was a forum that I had joined, and we ended up naming the bus Broccoli Bus because my last name is Broccoli, and when I was a kid, people called me Broccoli, like that, or whatever, and because they couldn't pronounce it right. And so I just, on a whim, just called it that, because why not? And it totally stuck. It has a lot of views. I think it had I think that thread, you got to dig back a few pages now, but it has 300,000 page hits or something or more. It's one of the top, it's in the top 10 probably builds that's on Skoolie.net, which is kind of neat. I don't really post there anymore though. It just got too much work to do that. The school bus came about, I think, primarily because it was cheap and accessible. And I totally get the argument about school buses being built like a brick shithouse versus a sticks and staples RV, which is built out of plywood and fiberglass. It's a little over the top to say they're basically built out of wood, fabric, and glue. That's what most RVs are built out of.
Absolutely.
And the types of boats that I worked on were these aluminum hulled boats that were practically indestructible. They had aluminum cab frames, aluminum bodies, aluminum everything inside of them. You could punch a hole in the hull of them, and they wouldn't sink because they had big flotation collars around them and stuff. They were super impressive boats, and I just loved the idea of a commercial grade, relatively industrial sort of just indestructible platform to build on. I really wanted to build a semi truck. I wanted to go get just a 54-foot tractor trailer and convert out a trailer. The reality is that when I started thinking about like cost and how big that was and everything else, it wasn't going to happen. I think some of the things that dictated was literally what was the space that I had available to build. We had a house at the time, and only so big of an area to park it in, and we had 4 kids, and so there was kind of this, one of those requirements was how many kids you're gonna, 4, and then my wife and I, and then probably some dogs and maybe a cat, I don't know who's gonna live with us, and it turns into just maximize the base size, which is 40 feet. I looked all over the place at different buses. Once we settled on a school bus, because I looked at commercial buses like tour buses and things. MCI, Prevo, Van Hool. I wanted a Van Hool really bad. The reason I wanted a Van Hool is if you look at the chassis on a Van Hool, it's basically Mercedes, or it's a very, very European vehicle. And I'm very familiar with the Unimogs. And if you look at the Van Hool, like literally the mid-90s Van Hools was sort of barely in the price range. Had the same gauges, same breakers, circuit breakers, same electrical system. It's all wire, very European style. I came to my senses eventually realizing that it would be impossible to find parts for all that stuff. And it was like, I got to go with something as easy as possible if this is going to be a house on wheels. And honestly, the big driver was cost. At the time, I didn't have a ton of money. So we had some, and school buses were cheap at the time. So, you could get a bus for $5-6 grand at the time, and it was of various sizes and shapes. And so really, it was just waiting for the right one to fly by for sale on one of the places that you can find, and pick that one.
Yeah. A lot of times people that hit me up asking about school buses, or they'll send me a picture of an MCI or a Prevo. And they're like, what do you think? I can get this deal on it. And I'm always like, well, if it's running great, it's good to go now. That's awesome. That's probably a fairly decent deal. But if it breaks down, what are you going to do? How are you going to find somebody who works on it? How are you going to afford parts for that thing?
Yep.
And with the school bus, the availability of Cummins parts, Allison parts, the chassis is pretty much a heavy-duty chassis that you can get a lot of the parts a lot of places, not including all the scrap yards where you're able to pick things up. So when it came down to picking your bus, what criteria were you specifically looking for as these buses you said were kind of flying by?
Right.
What exactly were you looking for, and what research did you do to figure out what you wanted and what you didn't want?
I wanted to get the equivalent of a 1988 Dodge Ram pickup truck with the 5.9 Cummins in it, the 12-valve Cummins. That was like, take the Dodge 12-valve Cummins pickup, like 2 years after Dodge introduced it. Those trucks are still on the road now, like the ones that haven't rusted all the way out. The joke with Cummins engines and those is the engine outlasts the whole platform of the vehicle, but those trucks still hold residual value now, and they're just really easy to work on. They're basic American trucks. Now, you got to scale up a bit for buses because it's not the same class of vehicle, but I was just looking for what is the most common popular, bus out there. It was Bluebird or Thomas was those ones. And then I just wanted to get the most simplistic thing possible. Like, I didn't want to get weird brakes. I didn't want it to be difficult wheel sizes. I didn't want like an electronic engine. I kind of was stuck with the transmission being what it is, but when you really look into it, the Allison medium duty transmissions is like ubiquitous. They're literally everywhere. You can go to any junkyard that has trucks and you'll find them.
Yeah, Tony, the guy at AAA Bus that we get a lot of work done, he says he stopped holding on to 3060s, MD 3060s, because when they come in, it's not a transmission that needs to be replaced. It's a cylinder. It's a seal that needs to be replaced. It's not the transmission itself. They hardly go out if you keep floating them. They're good to go.
Yeah, and the computers usually go before anything else on them. So it's like, so what this turned into was starting the criteria checklist of buses. Is eventually I would like to be able to park in an RV and RV park occasionally and not get thrown out. So it can't look like the further bus, as much as I'd like Baroque 1960s hippie ideal bus with crazy shit all over it, no. I can't.
Not gonna pull off a Kinkeezy, huh?
No. And so then that kind of turned into, well, it was a combination of maximizing the floor plan space, which is a front engine bus, because you just don't get the full 40 feet. And then the next was like speed. I wanted to go relatively fast. I didn't want to have to wind the thing out. So this all turns in, there's a lot of backfeeding into the experience of driving around the Unimogs and other off-road trucks and things like that. It's like kind of I had some elementary grasp on axle ratios and what it's like to be on the highway and what is it like to drive a really slow vehicle on the highway, and it sucks. You don't want to drive something slow. So that means finding a vehicle that has the right gear ratios for highway gearing. And I knew enough about buses to know that some of them are really slow because they're all geared for just routes back and forth. They need that quick acceleration pickup to cart the kids from one stop to the next till they get back to the school, and that's it. That's their life. They're designed for that, and that's fine. It's like a postal service truck, right? They're just made to go stop to stop. If you try to drive a post service truck across the United States, you're going to have some problems. They're not made to do that. So I think it's just, I was already pretty realistic in my head about what they are. They're industrial, purpose-built vehicles, and I'm about to take them and totally turn it upside down into something it was never intended to be. And so what's the most truck-like bus that I could find? And that ended up being a late model TC2000RE Bluebird bus. So the TC2000 and the All-American lines converged in 1998. After 98 and then into 99, TC2000 didn't really exist. It was the AFRE or something like that. I don't remember. There's something RE is what Bluebird's line converged into.
Pretty sure it's AF.
And so that was a Cummins 8.3, and it was the Allison transmission. It was Bud-centered rims on standard truck 22.5 by 20 rims, like normal truck, semi-truck tires. 40-foot long, 78 passenger, the correct amount of scale of gross weight. So all those things sort of started ticking the check boxes because I just needed to have the chassis that would be the heaviest duty of the line, the cheapest, the easiest to repair, the fastest, and the easiest to find parts for. Those were like the criteria that I looked for, and that squarely centered on Bluebird. I think that I could have gone with like a Amtran probably. I probably could have gone with a Thomas as well. The thing is there's varying bits of quality and things in those year ranges where they came through there. And I just, sometimes you just don't find them in that region. So I was up in the Pacific Northwest, and the place I bought my bus from, what was the name of it? Harlow's Bus. They just resell buses and stuff. And they were in, they were in Kent, Washington. They had lots of other places, and they had bought the bus back from Snohomish School District. And so that school district had that bus, and here's the funny thing is, I'd been watching the websites and looking around, checking eBay and Craigslist, and then I found Harlow's and Northwest Bus Sales and some of those other ones. I decided to just go down to Harlow's with money in my pocket, and that was literally the first bus I saw. I saw the other ones, but I'm like, what's that one right there? And so they're like, oh, don't worry about that one. You don't want that. And I'm like, well, why not? And so what was really funny is that these buses, like, this is the origin story of our bus, and every story is different. Mm-hmm. Ours was not starting. It was non-op. And they're like, well, and I asked, well, why is it not operable? Oh, just the battery, it turns on and won't start over. It's like, well, let's look at the batteries. And so someone had, apparently, and I got the story, he was like, oh yeah, it's one of those buses. If you really want to, we can go get one. So what it turned out is that somebody broke into the bus yard, stole a bunch of batteries, and replaced them with a bunch of old crappy batteries, and to make sure that nobody noticed that they were gone.
Yeah.
And they didn't notice till way afterwards. And that bus was actually destined for Honduras. There was a group of 4 buses that were going to get driven to, maybe it was Honduras, maybe it was Costa Rica. Anyway, it's one of those Central America countries where they take a lot of the buses down. They're going to drive them to Florida, throw them on a barge, and then live out their lives down there just doing work till they die. That particular bus didn't go because it was one that was hit. The other 3 were not. And the company that was doing the whatever, they just said, skip it, we don't care. And then they just took the 3 because they were on a time schedule. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got our bus. It was just there. So I think the thing to take away from this is that I didn't just walk into it blindly. I knew way ahead of time, like, I'm looking for chassis rust. I'm looking for obvious signs of discrepancy and badness. We went for a test drive in it. I didn't look anywhere other than pretty much watching the speedometer and the tachometer. When I was watching the gear range too, I was like, how many gears does it have? Oh, it's got 5-speed. Okay, how fast are we going at 65? Oh, we're doing 1800 RPM at 65 miles an hour. I'm like, sold. This is, as long as everything else looks good, because all that stuff's really hard to fix and change afterwards. So you are stuck with whatever you buy when you get that. It's like, you could change it, but you'll end up spending as much as you spent on the original bus to do that, and you don't want to do all those things. So then from there, it's like, is it a rusty piece of shit? What's the floor look like? What's the, what is there? Lots of dents everywhere? Has it been beat to hell? Is every single thing broken out or stabbed out? It's like, I always think of those things in the terms of, and this is really common. Like, this is normal stuff that if you're a heavy equipment trader or looking for trucks to buy or whatever, if you're in the secondary or tertiary market for this, you're looking for those things all the time. Think of yourself as some cut budget rate landscaping business trying to buy a bunch of landscaping trucks that already have 100,000 miles on them. They're all going to be beat to hell in various ways, and you're going to get ahead of everybody else by paying close attention to the things that will cost you the least to fix. So finding all that stuff that doesn't, have a lot of failures on it. Mm-hmm. If it's already got coolant dripping down, skip it next. Even if everything's perfect on it, it's like, you could go find another one. If it's got trashy tires and everything else is perfect, buy it. Tires are cheap. It's easy to change. They're consumable. Just change it out. If the body is all beat to hell, but it runs great, maybe it is. It depends on what kind of build you're going to do. So then you got to start thinking. You're always thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead of where you're at right now. If you just kind of buy it and not consider where you're going to get to, and that's where you're going to get into trouble, because you're not really planning ahead about what you want to do with the thing next.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter if it's a bus, a truck, a boat, airplanes, whatever, cars. It's all the same. I guess the last thing is that I've got this exposure because I grew up with my dad. He owns an automotive shop up in Linwood, Washington, and along with a business partner or two. And I've just always been exposed to what not to buy in a car. He never taught me how to work on cars. He explicitly forbade me from working on cars when I was a kid. He's like, you can't. You're going to be a computer nerd, and I'm a computer nerd. But I got a lot of exposure about what not to buy. Like, one of his axioms that I always still subscribe to is there's no car that's cheap. They all cost at least $7,000 if you want to buy a car. If you go buy a $1,000 car, you're going to eventually put $6,000 worth of effort into that car to make it reliable and get you around comfortably. If you buy a bus, it's different. It's a different number. It's not 7. It's probably like 20, I'm going to guess. You buy any type of large Class 8 truck of some kind, it doesn't matter if you get it for $1, $1,000, or $10,000. It'll probably cost you $20 grand when you're done, and you've gone through all the pieces just for the chassis, not adding it and turning it into a home or anything like that, like making it work. I think that's a pretty fair number to come up with.
Yeah, I think I'm at about the bus for 3, probably at 14 to get it to where it is now.
Yeah.
And that's definitely on the low side.
Right. I bought our bus for 5. I put 8 into the engine recently, so that's 13, and then I've put about 7 into the axles, the wheels, tire, and transmission. And guess what? I'm about $20,000 in on the chassis right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I had an $8,000, knock on wood, $8,000 engine rebuild,
yeah,
that'd be right there.
Right, you'd be at the same spot. And so that's, now that you've gone through all those components, you've kind of reset the clock, not to 0, but to something that is on a scheduled, like a maintenance schedule that you'll understand and can live and breathe with. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're dropping that money in, and you can go way higher than that. Like, that's like the minimum required. Like, I know people that have built out amazing high spec stuff, and they spend tens or hundreds of $1,000s on stuff. It's this, but I think that's kind of a minimum with these things.
So you got the bus, it performed well, you get it home. What was that transition process? Because obviously it took you a while to build your bus. You went, pretty much all out. You knew it was going to be a home for you and your family, so you wanted to do it right. What was the transition going from you get the bus home, you start the conversion? What was that like for the family? What was that like telling the kids, be like, hey, we're going to be paring down in the future? Like, what was that in between time of, okay, this is actually our reality. We have the bus. This is starting.
Yeah.
How did that mentally, and with Amanda, your wife, you said that she was into Skoolies. Like, what was her thought process? How did that change once the bus actually gets there and it becomes a reality? Was there anything of note that came up at that time?
I think the kids were embarrassed. I don't think they quite understood what it was all going to be about. I actually have a picture.
What do you mean embarrassed?
I have a picture that it captures this really well. I'll send it to you. Maybe you can flash it up on the thing or something. But honestly, like, Amanda had thought something that was going to be way simpler. Like, when we got it, I've been doing a lot of reading, and that's kind of a lot of trouble. That causes a lot of trouble for me because I see all these crazy ideas. We have a funny story that we tell people about buying houses where we had our real estate friend, agent friend. He was like, we were looking at this one house and it wasn't quite big enough. He's like, oh, just raise the roof. It'll be easy. And I'm like, I kind of laugh at that later because we literally raised the roof on the bus later. It was like, oh, it's easy. No, it was a huge, colossal pain in the ass. I don't really want to do that again. But I'd say to capture it succinctly is that Amanda thought it was going to be just straight on bus. We'll roller it white with some paint rollers, put some IKEA furniture in it, and go and cruise and be done. Mm-hmm. And I kind of started completely, thoroughly panicking about that idea because I had a pretty good idea what that's going to entail for quality of life. And I'm thinking, we're going to be running a generator all the time. I'll be ducking my head down and stooping down everywhere. It's going to be cold as fuck in the wintertime. It's going to be hot as hell in the summertime. And it's just going to suck. And I was like, I can't deal with that. Because I kind of thought in my head, what is this going to feel like to drive this? Mm-hmm. And if I wasn't going to accept that. Like, that was not my thing. And so I explained to her some of my significant concerns about that approach, and we kind of jumped into deciding that roof raise is probably going to happen. And then it kind of went from there. It was like, okay, so where do you want to go? Like, where are we gonna live? And so, staying in Montana in January is not really a comfortable place, so we'd have to go south. And so if you go south, well, you're living in the desert, or you're living in like the southeast maybe. Any of those places you get down past, the latitude there, it starts to get hotter, so maybe you need air conditioning. And this started on that other video. I talked about design spiral a little bit. This is that design spiral. I started thinking about, what are we going to really do with this thing? So we're going to live in it full time. We're going to maybe sell our house. Maybe we're going to rent it out. I didn't know at the time yet. There was a whole bunch of unknowns in here. There was a huge host of like, maybe this will happen and maybe that'll happen. I sort of started treating it like a side project. Like I approached it like I was building another Unimog instead. So when we first started doing it, we settled pretty quickly that roof raise was going to happen. So it was like the classic rip the seats out, take lots of pictures.
Smiling faces.
Oh, yeah, we'll be done in 3 months. Yeah, right.
I remember those times.
Those were fantastically optimistic times.
It's so funny. I tell you this all the time, but when I'm on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube and the smiling faces as they're taking out the seats, it's like a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach.
I feel bad for them.
Yeah, it's like, you guys have no idea. I hope you're able to keep that optimism. It's great. Awesome, but you got a lot coming your way that you have no idea.
I'm going to just shortcut to the punchline right now. Don't convert a bus. Don't convert a school bus. Go buy a bus that's already tall inside. Go spend the 25 to 35 grand on a later model MCI or whatever it is, because guess what? By the time you roll in the actual true costs of a roof raise and all that stuff, dude, you'd be spending the same amount of money as you would basically buying one of those older tour buses. You really would. If you want the cachet and coolness of driving a school bus, please go for it, though. There is some specialness there. I won't get that wrong. But if you just want to get it done and get on the road, having a vehicle that's already tall inside, has all the cargo, goes fast, and you just have to go, spend a bit of extra money to like make the stuff work inside, just spend the extra do that. You'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a lot more work and a lot more money than I ever anticipated. And that includes working with companies for some of my gear too.
I paid out the nose for everything. You're slick like that, and like you got some magic. You got some sort of je ne sais quoi about being able to sweet talk people into giving you stuff to
I guess,
try out.
man. But man, if I don't know if I'd do it over again, because for me, like I've never done a project like this, you know. But at the same time, like I always tell people just to buy converted school buses that have been on the road. Like if you're able to look at their social and see that thing is actually on the road, you see the repairs they've done, and you know, if you're tall like you and they did a roof raise, then that's perfect. But that's more rare. People don't really sell those as often. Typically, people do a roof raise. I think it might be spite. They're not selling that thing. Like nobody's taking advantage of that. I mean, people put in the sweat equity. Like, and a lot of times for the price, it seems as though they're just trying to get their money out of it. They're not including their sweat equity. Now you get buses like Wes's. It's more of a work of art where it kind of has a little bit more of a residual value because of how it was built. Right. But a lot of people, they just want to get their money back out of it. Yeah. Like, some people with bigger social accounts, they make a couple extra bucks on it. But a lot of people, a lot of the builds, they just sell them for basically what they have into it.
Yep. And I think the thing is buses are very similar to project hobby cars or hot rods or any of that stuff. In most cases, you've always put more money into it than you'll ever get out of it. You go build a Mustang Fastback, it's just cherry. Like you've spent all of the extra effort to hot dip the chassis and hammer out all the stuff, and you don't use any Bondo anywhere, and you use old school leading from that one old guy down the street who used to do that back in the day, and you build it out brand new with perfect new stuff. It's a $150,000 hot rod that you built, but you're not going to sell it for that much when the time comes. You'll use it for a while. This is the other thing. Most of the really good builds, people hold on to them. They don't get rid of them. So it's really tough to find things like this in the secondary market they're rare and they'll sell really fast. So you'll find them. But this is just like anything. Anything that's really actually a good, desirable thing gets snapped up instantly. You have to be on it.
People are waiting.
Yeah.
They're saving.
You're competing with lots of people if you're trying to buy one because it's a huge shortcut to drop 80, 100 grand on a vehicle that's been built out already. It actually just turns into a normal commodity like if you bought a nice RV. If you're buying a nice late model RV that's just gently used, second use, you're paying 80% of the value of what it started with. Now, if it sits for a few years, the value plummets because RVs are a different beast than school bus conversions are.
Yeah, they're pumping those things out, get them out of the factory as quickly as possible. Let the repair facilities worry about it later. Yeah. Let these people go out, it'll break, and we'll just repair it later. Let's just keep turning and burning.
Right.
Where
I think that school bus builds or bus conversion builds in general, they hold their value because they are not a wood shack on wheels. I think most of the bus conversions that are wood shacks on wheels, they don't sell. They're scrap price basically for those things.
Right. They got their use out of it.
Yeah.
So you said that the kids were embarrassed and moving forward a little bit further as you were getting into the building. I kind of alluded to this earlier. I guess the more general question is, what was the downsizing like from your house to getting to the bus? And I'm not saying like as the bus is finished and ready to go, but as you're going through the design process, what was it like kind of preparing people or even yourself? What was that like preparing, okay, I need to, like, this is what we're working with. How did you start to consider paring everything down to fit within the new living space?
Paring our life down was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, easily.
Yeah.
The bus build was easier than the paring down. We had a 2,200 square foot house with a acre and a third. I don't remember. I think it was an acre and a third of land. Lots of space. Kind of out in the outskirts of the Seattle area, and so it was a bitch to drive around and stuff. And we were like, we got too much stuff. We got all this stuff everywhere, and it's so easy to acquire stuff. Amazon makes it even easier to acquire stuff.
Yeah.
And so the George Carlin stuff talk. You've probably seen it.
No, I haven't. What is it?
Oh man, it's just a great.
Oh, George Carlin. Yeah.
He talks about stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was probably one of the inspiring bits of commentary that really helped us start really thinking about this. I'll be honest, Amanda drove most of that. I don't mind having lots of stuff, kind of curate my stuff and keep it around and whatever. But it rapidly became, we got to sell this house and we're going to find another place, and it's got to be smaller because we're going to do this. At some point, there was this tipping point that kind of happened. Like, put a lot of effort into the bus. At the time, we thought, you know, the roof raise and all the building out and all this stuff. And literally, like, every spare moment of my time was building it. Every weekend, every evening, sometimes in the mornings. And then between that, going to my regular day job. And then at some point it was switching jobs and then running the Unimog shop full time, and then also doing the bus, and then finding another job. And I went through several stages in my career doing stuff. At one point we kind of had to pause working the bus to prep the house for sale. So a whole bunch of rapid house remodel things to tie up all that stuff. That house had gone through the recession, the 2008 recession. And we'd put a whole crap ton of money into rebuilding that house because it needed a remodel. So we remodeled the whole house. I did most of the remodel stuff by the time we started the bus. So there was that sort of background now, a bunch of house remodel knowledge of things that at least kind of went into the planning and materials and what's it like to shop at Home Depot literally every day of your life, it feels like. But it was like constantly, there was these, as soon as we set our minds that we were going to have to list this house for the market to be hot during the summertime, that was like there was an end goal there. We had to kind of wrap some stuff up and be done. And there was a realization that this is serious shit. We're actually going to try to live in this bus. Holy crap. And we were selling the house. We also knew that we weren't done yet. So we ended up buying another house. But we lived in that bus unfinished. It had just an empty interior and stuff. Had beds in it. And that was about it. And insulation and lights.
With 4 kids?
With 4 kids, the 2 dogs, the cat, and then for like 2 weeks, Amanda's parents as well, because they came up to help us look for houses and stuff. We lived in a co-worker's who was gracious enough to let us park in his front driveway at a house that he owned but didn't live in. So we were there for like 6 weeks looking for houses, living out of our bus. It was weird. And
sure, that was fun.
It felt really strange. Like, this is super foreign, and I totally feel like a homeless slob, and this is not okay. I think back at those times and how quaint I was. It was great. It was like we just bought another house. So we bought another house. The house was now a 1,200 square foot house with a huge gravel parking lot that we could just park a bus on and work on it, literally right there. So the whole point of buying the house was to own it for a couple years to then sell it and be done with the bus. Like, it was too expensive and too difficult to find a place to rent for the amount of time that needed to get done to build that bus.
Let alone finding a place that you could rent that would allow you to park
to
a
even
bus
do
there.
it to begin with.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just got to buy another place. So for the people that are fortunate enough to have family or friends that let them park on their property for years at a time, or, you know, man, you've got it made if you have that. Like,
yeah.
That's like one of those checklist items. If you have property or a space you can work at, like your parents or whatever, or friends or, you know, relatives, it's far easier. Like, you have so much stuff that's a lot easier to get to. I read so many stories of people getting booted out halfway through their bus build, and they're screwed. They
have
can't
to
finish
sell.
it.
I mean, that's something that I always tell people too. Like, make sure you have a spot and have a for sure spot as a backup, because there's multiple times where they check with the neighbors. They're like, hey, we're gonna have a bus here for a while, and you're like, it might be. Let's just even numbers. We're going to be here for 6 months building this bus.
Yeah.
2 months in, all of a sudden, the city inspector comes in when that neighbor changes their mind when they hear the grinding wheels all the time.
Yeah.
So I went back to Indiana, and my bus wasn't done. I actually wasn't even living in it. Parked in our backyard. It's surrounded by trees, but you can kind of see the bus. The third day that I was at my aunt's house, again, I was sleeping on the couch inside.
Yeah.
Somebody called the mayor. Like, the mayor's office itself, and the city inspector came out to make sure I wasn't living in the bus. You know, so people think they have these spots where they can work on the bus, and then they get there and start getting set up. They buy the bus, they're pot committed, and then the city inspector comes in and be like, nope, you can't park it here. You
gotta go. And then now what?
You've in scrap prices.
Yeah. There's a lot of you really have to think like industrial. This is commercial endeavor is what this really is.
Mm-hmm.
You can slide by, but at the end of the day, commercial endeavor with the vehicle, with the space, the size of it is, the materials and parts you're working on, the chemicals, everything, every aspect of this is like owning a one bay autumn truck shop is what you're doing for whatever the duration is that you're building it.
Mm-hmm.
And you are going to encounter everybody else, whether it's positive or negative, their opinions on a truck shop next door if you have doing this kind of stuff. So back to the kid thing, we homeschool our kids, and we've done that since we started. So that was a huge benefit for us to be able to pick up and be mobile. Like, we didn't have to change school districts or whatever. It was just modify the curriculum. It got really pinchy towards the end of the second house that we were in because I wasn't available to help with school things, and Amanda was really pressed with trying to get the house done, and we still had the life of the kids, and I still had a full-time job too. Like, there's so many competing priorities that are going on there. And it turned into year 3 when we wanted to be done at year 2 with living in that second house, or maybe even year 1. I think Amanda initially thought we'd be there for a year and then we'd sell it. And I was like, well, there's kind of some capital gain stuff that has to go on with owning a house for at least a year. But and then it turned into 3 years for other reasons of various related items like that. And it was really tough because the kids, that whole time, it's just bus. Everything's about the frickin' bus all the time. And I got tired of it actually a lot. It's like, dude, I'm tired of this frickin' bus. Like, why are we building this? This is so much work. And I found that I was building more and more goalposts into accomplishments and feeling good about things. We started switching to driving and stuff instead, and I paid really close attention to the kids and how they reacted when we did that kind of stuff. And they were thrilled as fuck. They were like, this is the coolest shit ever. You could see it in their faces and the way they act, and it was like this new different thing. And there
became more real.
It became far more real to see that. And so that was those rewards as we were building it. Like, when you build in the lights and you start building in actual furniture, and then maybe it's actual seats, and at some point, like, plumbing went in and water worked and all this other stuff. And then that's when it really got realistic, because what we ended up doing is house number 2 also needed a lot of help inside, so we're kind of serial house remodelers, it seems like. So we ended up doing a bunch of small remodel projects in the second house. We replaced the floor, we did some changes in the walls and things like that, and we actually just had to move out of the house. So we moved into the bus, and so now I'm building this frickin' bus while we're living in it at the same time, which is like double hard because you're constantly working around people. And it's stressful from a sleep standpoint because, oh wait, I have a full-time job, so I'm at work by 9 or 8:30. I get home at 6:30 or 7 because traffic in the area, and then I start work at 7:30 till 1 in the morning, and then I go back and do that again for like 2 years in a row. The weekends were also bus work days, so you can check the blog. You can see all the posts that I've put over time. There's a million pictures and stuff up there.
Right. So people watching the video, it'll be in the description, and those listening to this will be in the show notes, so people can just click directly on that. So as you went into the design phase of the bus, what was that like in terms of planning? Like, I can't imagine trying to fit 6 people into a school bus. Can you kind of touch base on because you actually went through 2 designs since I've known you, because you had the original design and then that got switched out for a new design. But going to that first design, can you kind of touch base on where your thought process was, how that went, and obviously you'd make changes and just kind of following that up with what you ended up doing now with your layout.
There's actually more than those revisions, because you didn't see those ones. So I started out with putting tape on the floor, like I think everybody does. Because I was just I was aping what I saw everybody else doing.
Well, that's hashtag Instagrammable.
Yeah. And so the first layout, Amanda laughed at me. It's like, how the hell do you expect this to even work? It was like 16-inch wide corridor in one spot, and I put bunks in and all this stuff, and they're like, no, none of this was going to work. And then so I got challenged to try to make space saving, so I ended up with these folding bunk systems that was going to be like the best, and it was pretty cool. The kids got bunks. We were at the end of the bus, and then the kitchen and stuff were front. I think I built a layout that was kind of not conventional compared to literally every other Skoolie I've ever seen, which is just this layout right here, or variation on it. Open space with all the seating in front. That's like comfortable, cozy seating, and then everything, all the business in the back. What I ended up with was I had a lot of concerns about safety, about driving it, about what happens if we crash it, what happens if it rolls off of a thing. Like a friend of mine talked about how a long time ago we were just talking about building cars, like, roll cages and things and stuff like that, and how a lot of people who've home built roll cages who don't know what they're doing are actually making it worse, because if you get in an accident, a roll cage is going to bend and push in and turn into big steel spears, and you have survived the accident, except you got killed by your own creation because you just got mashed by the stuff you built inside of it. And I started looking at a lot of Instagram and YouTube videos and pictures of people building school buses where I see like the magnetic knife rack on the kitchen that looks really great. Right. But if you crash into something, they're going to just go like that right out through the front window. It's like some sort of, what was that movie?
Final Destination.
Final Destination shit going on here. People with their washer and dryer in their kitchen, their fridge, and heavy shit everywhere. Their wood stove sitting there, just sort of kind of terrifying. Like, I get it, it's super awesome and cozy, but I couldn't shake the image of a wood stove cannonballing its way up the front of the vehicle when I crash off a road, or somebody head-ons me, or there's an offset collision or something like that, or I blow out a tire, or just a million ways that shit can go wrong driving your vehicle. Because one of the plans I had was that I wanted to drive places, like not just loaf around locally, not just sit in one spot, yet here we are in Arizona sitting. I won't say that right now, but so it just really bugged me a lot to see that. So I ended up with automotive style seating built in a way that I have built other vehicles and things that was safe, with big bulkheads that are steel construction, like literally steel framing. There's no wood in those areas. It was all steel frame bolted into the frame of the vehicle. It ended up being, it doesn't feel like a Skoolie. It feels like maybe an airplane or a boat, maybe, is what it ends up feeling like. When you walk into my bus, it's significantly different than most people's Skoolies. And, you can tell because people get all weird. They kind of hang around up the front section, and they don't know where to go because there's like this little area that you come in, and there's like the seating. It's like, well, what do you do? And so it's like, no, come on back. And so you always have to get people to move to the back, and then suddenly it opens up and it's back there and it's different. And that is all driven off of my probably somewhat irrational fear of safety and how do we make this thing not a death trap in the case of collision or accident and stuff. And that is driven back to the thought of, what are the kids going to do? How are they going to ride with us? How are we going to operate and all these things? And so there's just it's just like a microcosm of building a whole house. Everything from the kitchen efficiency triangle in the kitchen to sleeping arrangements to all this stuff. And, we built it on the best assumptions we had at the time. What ended up happening, though, was we lived on the road for 3 or 4 months, and then we decided that those bunks that were super neat and folding were the worst thing ever because the kids never made their beds and they never really had a good space for their own, and so we chopped them up and shit-canned them out the side of the bus and built a whole new interior in the back out in the middle of nowhere. It was great.
Good old Aaron Bird.
But that worked out really good. I'm unhappy that it's built out of plywood. I would have preferred to have built steel framing again back there, but it's way in the back. All the steel framing stuff up front still in place. I'm okay with it. The critical areas that are the washer and dryer and some of the other things that are in the back are still in the steel frame construction, so those are all retained. It's just some of the wood, but they don't sit in those beds back there when we're driving, for example. They're banned from that. You can't go back there. So I think a lot of the design was driven off of how can I build this in such a way that it kind of feels more like maybe a gigantic people van, like a van, almost instead, or almost move it back to some sort of people mover vehicle as opposed to a house, literally with drywall on the walls and your kitchen right there and everything else. I couldn't not comfortable with those. So I think there was a lot of choices that were made that I think that my background in building vehicles that are driving around a lot, thrashing off-road or out in the water or whatever, like there's a sensibility that goes along with building a boat. You know, you build things in a particular way in a boat because you know you could hit heavy chop and waves and things, and you just don't build crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling unless you're the Titanic, and we all know that one went. So, yeah, I think there's just a lot of that went into that play.
So, we kind of alluded to it earlier. So you get the bus version 1 ready to go. You have the house. You've already moved into the bus. So I imagine there was a lot of back and forth on what comes into the bus, what doesn't come into the bus, what gets just taken to Goodwill. What was that process like of actually figuring out what you wanted to take with you on the road? And did you have a backup storage unit that you had in Washington for the stuff you didn't want to get rid of or you weren't sure if you needed? Like, what was that process like in determining what was going and what was not?
We kept nothing.
You didn't keep anything?
We didn't want to keep. Yeah, so that was the ideal. The reality was there was this trunk that Matt and I bought before we had kids. It was like, I don't know, we got it at Pier 1 Imports or whatever, but it was cool. And it wasn't Pier 1, it was, what's that other one that has all the neat stuff?
World Market?
I liked it. It was neat. It had stuff in it. It was like our keepsake trunk or whatever. And I'm like, we're going to make it fit in the bus. And so we fit it in there for a long time, but it ended up being just, once again, the wrong shape. Any household goods just don't seem to fit really good in a bus. At some point, we put that in storage. But we ended up, so after the second house, and we got all the stuff finished, like the electrical, the solar, the water, the heating, the cooling, the everything. And that second house that we had bought and lived in for 3 years just to build the bus, and that was listed and sold, we had packed everything down to a 10-foot by 10-foot storage unit. So everything left in our life. Towards the end of the stuff, I had a whole garage. Like, I mean, remember I said about industrial operation for building trucks? I literally had a tiny factory for building school buses into RVs. I could have built another one in a quarter of the time because I had all the tools and all of the parts and all of the knowledge to just build it. I could have just kept doing it. I didn't want to because, but we listed so much stuff for like yard sales, and we're notoriously bad at holding yard sales. It seems like nobody ever wants to buy our stuff. So we did this one thing where like we did a pay as you go, or pay what you think feel it's worth, and it was great. We like rolled the window down in the car a little bit and said pay what you think, and put a bucket in there. And we literally made more money by not attending the garage sale because people got guilty about what they were doing, and they just shoved money in the window. And we ever made because everybody would haggle every freaking thing out. I hated garage sales and yard sales because of that. So we'd help one of those, and then this one really kind Russian guy, Ukrainian, he came by 3 times in a row over the couple days we had the big yard sale with all the good stuff in it. And he wouldn't buy anything. And he was just like, how much for this? And I'm like, it's like $5. He's like, will you take $1? And I'm like, no. And then so finally he came back, and we're kind of like, nothing's, there's like bits, there's a lot of stuff still. And I'm like, I just want to get rid of this. And he came back again. It's like, look, I just really want to get rid of this at this point. I don't need it anymore.
It's what every garage seller loves to hear.
That's always comes into. But like, take that thing. If you've ever had a garage sale and you had that feeling at the end of the garage sale, I just want to get rid of this. Multiply it to the point it's literally every physical possession in your life that doesn't fit on the bus. That's a kind of an extreme garage sale going on. And this guy, he was like, ended up knowing that he had like 4 kids and his wife, and he does stuff with, they're all in college or whatever, and he works with his church and does things, and it was just kind of an interesting story. I just said, look, just help me get rid of all of it and you can just have it. This is what I told him. I don't want any money, just help me get rid of it. Please make it go somewhere that you think would be worthy to go, because it was like literally a full toolbox full of random crazy tools. I sorted through a bunch of tools, and I had kind of the crazy toolbox of all the old crap that I've collected for the last 18, 20 years of whatever, doing this sort of thing. Everything from that to materials to paints to furniture to just all that stuff. And at some point it just clicked. This is just stuff, and I don't need any of this stuff. And it was this extreme exercise in reduction of things. It wasn't even KonMari. It was like, it wasn't KonMari, does this give me, what does it give, does this give me,
is it happiness?
Happiness or whatever?
Yeah.
And then you thank it?
Yeah.
It was more like, I fucking hate all this shit, and I want it gone, and I'm going to roll it right off this cliff. It's like, that was how it felt. There was no KonMariing coming to terms with it. It was like, I'm so tired of this stuff.
Right.
And it was very, very healthy feeling to get rid of that. It was great. So we got rid of just basically everything. And
so it sounds like you were ready mentally just to let it all go, obviously.
Yeah.
What about the kids? What about pairing their
I felt really
their
bad
toys?
about them because they had a lot more difficult time coming to terms with this stuff isn't going to come with them. Mm-hmm. I also
there was no toys. There was nothing
they
that
got toys. A few. They had some stuff.
They had like a quota of 5 toys each, or like
there was no quota. It was like, there's your space. Go fit it. Figure out what fits. And then they wanted to be like, well, I want to bring the swing set. And I'm like, no. I want to bring my wagon. No. I want to bring all these dolls. What fits? And then they would cram all the dolls in there, and there'd be no room for anything else, and they'd be sad that there was nothing, because we have 3 girls and 1 boy.
Right.
And it was hard. And I think that this was a huge transition for me because I've lived in a standard Western American way, which is I live in a house. There are nooks and crannies for things. I'm selling my house. I'm buying a bigger house because I can put more stuff in my bigger house. And now my kids are growing up and they're seeing me with my stuff, and I've let them have their stuff because stuff is the way we do stuff. And suddenly I came to terms with it, but they didn't yet. And now I'm telling them you have to. And I look like a huge asshole telling them, no, you can't have all that. And they were real unhappy about a lot of those things. And it was like, there wasn't time to come to terms with all of that, and I feel bad about that a bit. But at the same time, I think it was potentially one of the best habits I could break in my kids from right away, early, is to say, stuff doesn't give you happiness, and things don't give you happiness. It's curating what you've got and taking care of those things. They now are fiercely competitive with the things they've got, and they protect those things that they've got really. So maybe I've gone too far the other way. I don't think there's any way that you can do this that's right. I'm always going to be wrong no matter how I do it.
Well, I'm not a parent, but from what I listen to on podcasts and everything, seems like there's no real right way. You're just trying to figure it out as you go and do the best you can.
And Amanda's the same way. She's always conflicted about what can we keep, what can we get rid of. We find that we sort of slowly accrue things now until it gets overwhelming and we have a big purge. Just go in a garbage bag. It's like, you don't really need that. And it's gone. Here comes Brixby over here.
One of them's coming over right now. But So in terms of where, you went from how they were before to where they are now, how is it now living in the bus with 6 people? How does that actually work? And what I mean by that is, how do you guys find a balance? How do you guys figure out how to make it work with 6 people? What is that like?
I think what it first of all is that we've got clearly defined areas where we get our own space. I think my area de facto is the front. Like, I'm on the other side of that weird little curtain that's in that front area, so I got my office, which is, I spend almost all my time there. Like, when I work during the week, I'm at the seat behind the driver's seat. If we're driving, I'm in the driver's seat. It's like,
that's your little corner that you're pushed to.
That's my area.
Yeah.
Amanda's area is our bedroom area, couch area. She's got her spot on the couch. If you're sitting in it, you better watch out. She will get you. But that's her space. She's got her area. It's all set up. It's comfortable. Mm-hmm. I think we all like it because it's probably the nicest place in the bus, honestly. But that's why she's also fiercely guarding it. The kids have their own bunk or cubby hole bed areas now. Instead of the bunks that fold, we switched to rooted. So our sleeping area is in the center section of the bus, effectively behind the shower, bathroom, it's like from the very front it goes driving area for office, then it goes kitchen, then it goes kind of bathroom, and then it goes living area / bedroom for us, and then it goes closed area, storage, washer, and then right behind that, over effectively the engine hump in the back, is the kid bunk areas for all 4 kids. And so the kids all have, I made sure to be equitable in the amount of cubic inches they all get. They all have they're all I can stretch out with my body and lay in their bed, each of their beds, and they got a 6 foot, like almost 6.5 foot length of space for their bunk areas. And they all have their space areas for their things. We try to be fair with, like, if they were to switch out to different positions, they'd still have the same amount of space. And so the kind of the contract we have is basically, it's the verbal contract of your stuff has to fit in the space. When it's barfing off of the thing onto the floor, you have too much things. The reality is that Amanda and I are the ones responsible for every piece of matter that they acquire and hold on in their space. So you can tell we still buy them stuff. We haven't really shaken the whole like buying things and wanting to have material possessions because they bring you joy. So I think part of that is trying to figure out what fits better in our life to support whatever it is we're trying to do. And so sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And there is no Amazon review that says, does this work well in a 40-foot long bus that you live in full time? There's no checkbox to filter for shit like that. When you go to the grocery store or whatever, the department store, and you need a thing, it's like, I need a blender that fits in my 40-foot bus. Well, the only blender is one that you don't buy. You don't really need a blender. Or if you do, you better have a damn good reason to have that thing. So it's like, we have a toaster, that's it. Like, for appliances. There's a coffee maker. But there's no real, like, cooking appliances that are, like, purpose. I think we do have a blender, actually. But the idea is that that's, like, kitchen things. The kids have their laptops for school and for fun. Their art supplies. Anders, our boy, he's got his various dinosaurs and cars and Legos and things like that, kind of boy stuff that he likes. He loves his Nerf guns. We seem to go through a lot of Nerf guns because what happens is the Nerf gun is fine, and then suddenly one day something breaks on it, and then the Nerf gun lays around in various pieces of disrepair, and then we're finally chunk it and it's trashed. I think that's for most people that have kids, there's a life cycle of like toys and things that kids get over time, and so we have that same cycle. It's not really any different. It's just much smaller scale.
Right.
I know I've seen kids, we go visit friends or whatever, and their kids got their bedrooms and they're just stocked with so many toys, and it's like, oh my God, I could have fun in here. There's so much stuff to play with. And then my kids go over and go, and they're all going to town and everything because they don't have that.
Right.
So what ends up happening is when we're on the road, the kids have their drawing stuff and the computers and relatively Spartan existence. And so then they go out, start digging around in the mud outside, and they play with rocks. And it's like, I'm not trying to make that sound bad, but it's like, well, we just don't have that much other things. And I've found really fascinating that they built some really cool shit out of rocks. Like, they build this whole, you saw the Sandman that they dug in the thing.
That's pretty cool. They were out there working on it together, taking turns.
Who it reminded me of is the face on the album Crimson King. What is that? I can't remember the name of that album. It's like, is got it the big Queen? Flared nostril. No, it's Crimson King. Like
Crimson King. It reminded me of
the Crimson King. That prog rock stuff from the 70s. There's this crazy looking face, and they made this. They never heard that music before, but they ended up making this crazy nostril flare, wide-eyed, crazy face thing out in the sand. And like, holy shit, I couldn't make that.
I mean, it reminded me of Queen. Yeah. Like one of the Queen faces. Like, I had an old Queen shirt that had a face similar to that. That's what it reminded me of.
Right. Or what the kids do now, instead of playing with toys, and they do have some Barbies and ponies and unicorns and things too. They go out and get together with the other kids that we meet up with, and they go like start a lemonade cartel amongst several of the people, heisting a bunch of things and then making money and selling stuff. So it's like the creative energy isn't lost. It's not sunk into just being sad. It's like the outlets go other places. Yeah. And honestly, it's like, that proverbial golden age of when you were a kid. When I was a kid, we did wholesome, great activities. None of this video game stuff. It's like, it's not that, but it's something way closer to that than we had before. One of the things is that I really limit their computer stuff to the school things. Like, they can't get onto a bunch of websites. They're not playing Fortnite, none of that crap. Like, our infrastructure would support it if we wanted to, but nobody's playing that. instead, I give them a crazy embedded microcontroller computer, the Raspberry Pi that I'm crazy about, and I say, here, figure that out. And they got a screen and keyboard and stuff, and they're all screwing around writing programs in Python and stuff because they're so desperate to get to Minecraft or whatever it is that they'll do anything, including actually write programs and learn how to use a computer.
Right.
And I'm not mad about that. I think that to see that is to see them actually have to work through problem solving and not have things given to them. And they have to work through stuff that they really want. And there's been a lot of that. I think that ultimately is more reflective as what everybody does when we're all adults and we're grown up, which is life is kind of a pain in the ass sometimes, and you got to work towards stuff and to get things. And in this case, it's like you're not I'm not giving them an allowance for things. We just buy stuff spontaneously or whatever because it's fun, but we have to really think about the space and things. But really what it is that we try really hard to be fair about giving them the opportunity to want something and to really to do things to get to that point. We've still got a long ways to go. We're not perfect. I wish they'd do the dishes a lot more, or whatever. There's just a million reasons. I'm sure every parent ever has always had the same problems that we're having right now. But I feel like in some respects it's pretty normal, like the challenges of doing that. And I don't see us living in a bus for forever either.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, have you and Amanda talked about a timeline, like what you're thinking, like what is the goal? Do you have a goal with, we're going to do this for X amount of years and then we're going to do this? Like what does the future hold for what you guys want to do?
I think we're using the bus as an excuse to look around and see places we hadn't seen before and experience it and live there. We hadn't been to the East Coast yet. I'm a little up in the air on whether that's something I really want to do. I'm kind of on your mindset. Just shade and relief the areas to the left side of the Mississippi River, and there's enough stuff to do on that side. Once you get to the other side, just stuff seems to get a lot harder.
Yeah.
Everything from cheaper free camping to people that'll even accept you to stay there, to traffic, to weather, to everything. It's just harder.
Yeah.
I'd love to go. I'd love to drive to the Northeast. Maybe that's what we do next. Maybe this coming year we drive up through Minneapolis and go there, and because we went there last year and it was fun, and it'd be fun to go there again, and up into Minnesota and Wisconsin and then Michigan and cut across. I'd love to see the Great Lakes, up in the Northeast. I think that's a little more interesting. I've told several folks I'd love to be able to see a rocket launch in Florida, but that's the other corner. So it's like a lot of driving. And, you think about what that really means is it goes right back to all the ideas that I had about building this thing to drive a long ways and all over the place. And so we want to do all that. I don't know if it's going to be a year or two. I think we're going to get a little tired of living in the space in another year, if I were to make a prediction. And we'd like to find some property to maybe have a space where we can pay taxes on it and tell society that that's our space, so leave it alone, and have a place that's a home base to park at.
Would you build a structure? Like, would there be a house there, or would there be an outbuilding? Like, is that the plan? Or
ideally, if I had a big flat area that I could build a pole barn and just park it alongside of it and do something and be legal with whatever code and ordinances and stuff, that would be ideal. Reality is it's probably going to be something that's already been built and used, because we won't want to spend the money on building something new because it's just more stuff. And probably just adjust it to fit our needs at that point. I don't see us getting rid of the bus right away. Like, I'd like to keep it and still go drive and do things and things like that. The kids are going to get older, and there's nothing that prevents us from keeping it other than maybe we just really get tired of it and want to do something else. I think that it's important for us to consider that it's not our identity, it's just a vehicle. It's our house right now. And I have, without hesitation, sold and bought houses in the past, and this is no different. It's just ones that drives around right now. And so, maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's still a few years out, but our kids are going to get older, and I want to give them, there is a point to which living in a bus in a nomadic fashion is a hindrance to children's upbringing than it is a benefit. And I think it's good to set some foundation that this is how small of a thing you can live with. Like, this is the minimums that you can deal with, and just get I would prefer that they got better at the quality than the quantity of things, of all things that are, and this is our chance to do that, to set that pattern down, and then later when you open it back up again to being the standard of way that people live, you'll find that you need less resources. I think that's one of the big things. Like, that goes with the solar stuff and all the other things. Like, we're way smaller of a footprint. I'm sure someone on this video will call my ass out about it being wrong or whatever, but I was doing some math on the carbon footprint of our family and how big we are and what we do and all this stuff, and we're actually smaller than the average American family for carbon footprint with all the things that we do. I think that it's good because long term we all have to learn how to use a little bit less resources and be more effective and be less consumerist with what we do, and so this is a great way to actually practice that, to see what happens. We spend a little bit more time at Family Dollar than we used to, because literally that's all there is when you live in the freaking desert. But it's not like we're buying a bunch of things and storing it in our cupboards. There's no space for that. We're buying water or like cake mix or whatever, just normal stuff that you just live on a daily basis with. And so, there'll be a day when we'll have lived in an area and we're like, we really like living here, and we'll plunk some cash down for property or a house. Usually when you buy a house, it's hard to buy just property, just cash straight out, because you can't really get loans on property, so you get a mortgage or whatever it is. Because I'm basically resigned that until, if there's some reckoning for housing prices and stuff, anything that's worth a damn to buy in an area that's close to a city or population is going to be really expensive still. I'm really unhappy with how expensive it is to buy property and things. I just really have gotten tired of how much that costs. So we'll probably get something cheaper that's out farther away, or we'll come up with some rationalization as to why we're spending all this money, or maybe it'll be a combination. We'll get some property and we'll put the bus there, and then we'll go rent a condo or something like that. Or I don't know. I still work full time. I do a lot of IT service work, and what is my title right now? Solutions engineer is what I'm called right now. So that's the most generic title in the world. So it's like, I'll be doing that for another 20 years, and then presumably I'll retire and go, live in an RV out in the desert?
I don't know. That's what we're surrounded by.
Shit, that's what I'm doing already. So, it's all. I'm confused, and I don't really know what that future holds for any of that.
I think anybody living this life is a little confused in what the future holds, because it is a interesting dichotomy the way we're living our lives now, because just like you alluded to, we are surrounded by what people have been working their entire lives to achieve. In a way, is to be able to get an RV, travel out in the middle of nowhere, be able to travel full time. But we're living it now. So what does that look like for us?
Yeah.
When it comes to that point, have you been to a spot? So you're around the Seattle area. Have you wandered across an area where you're like, oh, this is actually a really awesome spot. Maybe this might be something. Or are you still so far within the discovery phase of things where you're not even to that mental point to look for different options?
Well, California was nice, but it's not ever going to be the thing. Like, man, I sure liked living in Half Moon Bay. That was really awesome. But I can't afford a $2 million, 1,000 square foot Rambler. Sorry. So California's gone. Idaho was nice. I really liked Boise. Downtown Boise was awesome. But I see that by the time we're going to be ready to do something, the price is there, because literally there's a massive influx of people into that area.
I think it's the second fastest growing state.
Yep, it's going to be Seattle again. And that means that if I put my money on the table for that place, I'm going to be right back to where I was when I started this journey to get the hell away from the Seattle area. I really liked Albuquerque. I know the summers are hot, but man, it's a beautiful state. New Mexico's a beautiful state. Albuquerque is a beautiful city. Amanda thinks I'm nuts. I don't know why she doesn't like it there, but
then that
she's got her reasons.
That means Albuquerque's out, because that's kind of a team decision, right?
Decision, right? There's areas like in the Midwest that I really thought were awesome. The thing is a lot of times the places that I have a really great impression is because it's seasonal. I thought Minneapolis was beautiful. We were in there in May, just before it got hot and mosquito-y. It's not there when it's icy and frozen and windswept, but in May it was really nice. Albuquerque was really beautiful in October. Oregon's really nice in, like July. So
able just to taste the best parts, just like Alaska.
Yeah.
Like
Arizona's really beautiful in November.
Amazing.
In December?
Yeah.
Oh, January?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice
man.
and sunny.
It's sunny. It's like you can walk around. You just need a light jacket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was sitting down talking to somebody, I was telling somebody how much I love Alaska, and Fritz, he's a Skoolie guy that comes down
Fritz.
here. Yeah. So he comes down here during the winter, and he's like, dude, you only been there during the summer. I was like, that's true. It's amazing during the summer. I guess I was there for December. Like, the sun, down in Seward, it would get gray around 10 a.m., and it would be dark again around 2 or 3.
Right.
Because it would just be overcast a lot of time. It was snowy and cold. And I was like, okay, I see why it gets a little depressed.
I mean, if you want to get really into weird future-looking sounding shit, let's talk about climate refugee and climate change. If you look at there's a blog, Cliff Mass, he's a professor of atmospheric science up in the University of Washington, and he posted this article on his blog a few years ago about climate refugees. Where are they going to go by the time it's 2040 to 2050? Mm-hmm. Everything I've been reading about climate right now shows that humanity is greatly exceeding its predicted capacity of changing the climate right now. We're actually ahead of the schedule for increasing the temperatures and changing things. And it's not like temperatures increasing in areas, it's just changing. So the jet stream does this big crazy loop. So now we've got monster storms and stuff in the wintertime and really crazy cold weather and really extreme weathers during the summertime too. If I'm going to plunk down my bet, I'm 40 right now, 41. Let's just say 30 years, so 70. That's kind of average expectancy before I'm going to get decrepit and dependent on other people. In 20 years, it will be 2040. And that 2040 is kind of a special time mark. If you look at climate, if Google climate change 2040 predictions, you go off of the average predictions of what you see, and it's kind of dire sounding. Like, it's not great. And at the rate we're doing things, either making adjustment to mitigate that, it's not happening fast enough. I think we're kind of going towards hell in a handbasket eventually. And living in a bus isn't the most ecologically sound thing. That diesel exhaust is, maybe a bit of a greenhouse thing.
Just a little.
A little bit. And I feel a little guilty about that. But I think the reality is that what pin would I put on the map to live somewhere?
Where is it?
I don't know. So this one article and a couple other, you start crossing out on the map where you don't want to live. It's kind of like the Walmart no park things. They don't tell you where you can park at Walmart. You tell you where you can't park at Walmart, and whatever's left over is where you can park overnight at Walmart. Mm-hmm. So the areas that win are generally in the northern latitudes. The Pacific Northwest is one of them. So Idaho seems like a really nice place. Western Washington's great, except it's kind of screwed up in its own special way. You get a little further eastward, and you get all the bad intersections with the jet stream and climate rolling down from the Arctic. So it's not like the Arctic's going to heat up and be 60 degrees in the summer in the summertime or whatever, or wintertime. What's going to happen is the sub-zero freezing ass temperatures from up there are going to descend further like a big curtain of unhappiness further into the continental climate and make a lot of areas worse than they already are. And the areas that are hot are going to just get hotter and stormier and awfuler. And it's like, I don't really want to deal with that. And so we're kind of screwed. And I think that maybe us people living in mobile conveyances are ahead of this curve a little bit in some respects. We're probably not doing it consciously. We're just doing it reactionary for other forces. But I feel like I should be proceeding into any commitment for the rest of my lifetime with due caution as to where I'm going to be picking up a spot, because that will plant the seeds for my children where they're going to live, and they're going to have an area that they may spread like diaspora across the United States or the rest of the world to somewhere else. I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to follow some pattern that my wife and I set down for how we're going to live, And this is right now the time to be doing that. And so if I set down a pattern of it's okay to move to somewhere else because you don't really need to be in there, that's probably the best gift I can give my kids for future, whatever they're doing, is to give them some confidence that you can operate in any type of scenario or climate, or many different kinds, instead of in this one way. That will give them the evolutionary competitive advantage to perpetuate my, our families on into the future. That sounds so fucking nerdy when I say that, but
I don't think so.
I think there's some truth to it.
No, I mean that's something where I'm from in Indiana, where a lot of people never have the concept of leaving. Yeah, it's just nothing. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but until that I had the opportunity to study abroad, and I realized like the sun's setting right here in Arizona, but elsewhere in the world it's rising somewhere else. Yeah. And when I was over there in Australia, it hit me. Like I wasn't even when I first got there. It was like maybe halfway through my semester, I was just like, holy, like this is literally another part of the world. And from that point on, my
world shrank a bit.
My reality, and this is an exaggeration, my reality literally shifted. It was like I was on one side of a coin and all of a sudden I was on the other. It was like black and white, like that quick. It just happened in a moment. And once you get that realization that you don't have to be anywhere you don't want to be, it is absolutely life-changing.
Very freeing.
And that basically perpetuated my traveling since then. Sure. Just knowing the option, like last year going over to Ireland, just be like, I found a ticket for $400, and it's not just some escapism vacations. Like I'm gonna go explore over there. Let's go check it out. Yeah. And once you have that mindset and realize it's possible, that's it. So last question for you. Somebody that's been listening to this, they have a family, they're thinking about...
They're still listening?
How far are we in?
I don't know.
How far are you guys in? 1 hour and 20 minutes. I mean, Joe Rogan goes 3 hours. I'm by no means comparing myself to Joe Rogan, but people like long-form content. Yeah. Somebody's been listening to this for the hour and 20 minutes, and they have a family. They're trying to figure out if they want to do a fifth wheel. They're trying to figure out if they want to do a Skoolie. They want to hit the road. They have the same situation as you, where they wanting to travel for a bit while they have the opportunity, while their kids are younger, whatever reason it is, but they're on track to do what you've done. They look at what you've done already, and they want to replicate that. Yeah. Very general question, but what advice would you give them from the get-go? Like they're at the point where they haven't made any decisions yet, other than we're going to sell our house, or we're going to put our house up for rent, or whatever. What advice would you give them?
I'd say that you really want to have to. There's so many competing things that can affect your decision, from family desires and tribal direction. Everybody has a tribe. Go look at Wait But Why for a whole college education class on tribalism. It's interesting.
Right. And Sebastian Junger, Tribe. Yeah. Love that book.
But I think that there's just so many factors, like the tribe you have at work, the way you make money, the tribe of your family, the tribe of your own tribe, your significant other and your kids, your neighbors. Every single one of those people, individuals, are going to have an impact in your life. That's kind of facet number one that I'm thinking of right now, and I'm kind of just making this shit up as I go, but I'm thinking about it. Another is, what are you comfortable with? If you're really just want to, I think that if you're in a position to try to take steps away from being in one spot and living in a house and doing a thing over and over again, you're already more steps than you think you are away from that way of doing it. So many people are comfortable about a routine. Humans love routines. Is an evolutionary advantage to have a routine. If you don't have routines, you're kind of fucked. So we all have routines. We develop them. It's a way to economize on brain power and all sorts of reasons and things. I have routines now with driving and bus and all that stuff. So it's about being really careful about selecting a new set of routines. And I think that you need to spiral out from the thought of, what are we doing? Are we trying to just reduce our stuff footprint? You can do that by living in a tiny house. You don't have to go on the road and hit the road. You could just go get a small house and force yourself to not buy Amazon shit all the time. you might end up with a whole storage container outside because you couldn't get past that mental thing or whatever. I've seen people do that. So maybe it's not about the stuff. Maybe it's about seeing the world. So it's about travel. I am the wrong person to ask about how to travel the world and see the world. I got 4 kids. I have a full-time job. I'm kind of committed to this stuff. I don't move very fast, and I don't really want to go see the rest of the world right now because it's too much effort. I jealously read those Instagram posts and blogs of people that have gone to Thailand with their kids, and they're just doing stuff, and it's awesome, and they're just having a great time, and doing world school and all these things, and I just don't think I'm that person. I'm not cut out to do that. So I'm kind of just doing something halfway between. I'm not sure. I'm doing my thing. But I think that when you think about it, it's the people, it's your tribes, it's the people you've arranged and worked with. We cut ties with a lot of people. Like, it's not like we did it intentionally. We just kind of stopped talking to them as much. Other people we didn't talk to, we start talking more to now, even though we're far away. It's funny how it's all changed around. I think that it is unfair to say you have to have a plan. You don't need any plan. It's really about following something. It's almost that, like, well, everybody else is walking that direction, so I'm just going to walk in this direction to figure out what happens. Probably most of the time, everybody's walking that way for a pretty damn good reason. And I've learned that doing this. There is a shit ton of reasons why people live in houses and live in communities, and you can't. This goes back to the off-grid thing. Nobody's off-grid. Nobody's independent. You're always dependent on somebody else's community and connections of people. We're outside of Quartzsite, right? Quartzsite's a town. It's a community that's existed since the 1850s. Started out with a bunch of miners and people from, like, Libya or something. That one, what's that guy's, the High Jolly monument?
Yeah, I forget his name.
So you go to town and you go get a pizza, and if there's a community, you know that the people that own that business
That's
live
Silly
there.
Al's.
Silly Al's, or whatever. Or you go to the grocery store, you go to the gas station. You're walking in on somebody else's community, but you're just sampling it out. I don't want to live in Quartzsite. It's a nice place, but it's not really my cup of tea. We go to all the other places, the big cities and stuff, and they're awesome, and they got all the stuff I would want to do. I could easily sell everything, set up shop. I'd probably have learned some stuff about how to not be so dependent on things and live in a smaller space, and we could very easily just pick that life. But really, it's like, and I think about doing that, and I'm like, well, that's a lot of work to do that. You know, it's kind of like I ran this far across, now I got to go all the way back over to doing it that other way. So now it's like, it's easier for me now to continue living in a bus, traveling and seeing stuff, than it is to go back to try. So it's now I got to expend the energy to get back to living a different way. Mm-hmm. So when you are sitting at the point of, I hate going to work, I hate living in a house, I hate all these things, or I dislike them, or they don't make me happy, and you want to Marie Kondo your entire life, including, like, actually the house itself, that's when you can, it doesn't matter what vehicle you take, if it's a school bus conversion or a boat or living in a tent or whatever it is, but you better be considering the other people in your life, and not just like your spouse and your kids, but your friends, your neighbors, your parents, your relatives. They're all affected by your choice, because you're all interconnected. Every human is interconnected, and that is a key thing of humanity. We're not individuals, and anybody that says they're an individual is either deluding themselves or ill, because having community and friends and people is as important as having hands and feet and ears and eyes and a brain. It is a integral part of what humans are, and to run away from it all, you should always be looking, introspecting in yourself. Why is this driving me to do this? And maybe there's some things that are chasing you, and no matter where you go, that will follow you. You can drive anywhere, you can travel anywhere, you can see anything. It will be with you because it's inside your head. It's not anybody else's thing. And so it's really, really important to consider, are we doing this for a learning lesson to try to improve something that I have a deficiency in? Or am I trying to do this because the world is a really big place and I just want to see more stuff? And if it's the latter, I think that's a better thing than to correct problems that you have. So in all the places, I think that for us has been the primary driver, is to see new things. We like eating. Like, we love going to restaurants. I was on a keto diet for a while. I lost a bunch of weight. I gained some of it back because I stopped the keto, but then I started, then I stopped again. Anyway.
Silly owls will get you.
Silly owls will get you again. But, dude, we've had some of the most amazing food experiences driving all over the place. And it's just like, that's been awesome. I love doing that.
You should start a blog doing that.
I should.
Do a vlog doing that.
Like, she's like the food critic, and she can sniff out the really good stuff. And
perfect.
I just kind of like, I have to defer to her. There's times where I pick it, and I just absolutely regret picking things more often than I should not. Then I just like, oh, geez, I should stop. So she tends to know where these things are at, and so that drives a lot of our decisions locally when we're in areas. And that's another reason that we would like to go see more, is to sample that. And there's just so much interrelated with food that, and guess what food is connected to? Community and talking to people. Yeah, maybe you're in a restaurant, but there's this undercurrent anywhere you go and you talk to people and you can see what's going on. And I think that's ultimately, that's a huge question that I can't answer in this thing, which is, why do people travel and see things? It's a human experience, and you're trying to see more where you're at. I feel like since I've been driving around North America, I've got a much better perspective to see how big the planet is. I would love to see Europe and Africa and Asia, and maybe travel some oceans and stuff too. But I just don't think I can do that right now and feel safe and do that correctly. There's too many obstacles to do that. Like, yeah, I could jet around in an airplane or whatever, I guess. We could change radically that way. But it's not interesting to me to do it that way. Kind of like touching the ground the entire time away I go. Like, not like I'm not afraid of airplanes. It's just, I like standing in this wash and contemplating all these crazy rocks that are out here, knowing that they're millions of years old and they came from all this continental uplift and upheaval and erosion and things like that, and I'm touching it. And
just out hanging out in it.
That rock is 100 million years old. It's like, that's kind of weird. I like that. That's my thing. I don't think everybody's like that, though. So for the kids, that's not occurring to them at all. They're just stuck in this boring desert. Dad, when are we going to go do something fun?
They're putting the rocks in the face they make.
Right. But the more important thing is, and the thing that always brings them joy, is connecting with our friends. They're always harassing, when's Chris going to show up? Because we like hanging out with you, and they like playing video games with you and stuff.
Yeah, I got the squirty gun too.
Yeah. And our other friends, Bricks of Happiness, they love playing with their kid, and all the other bus friends and things that show up. It's like, it's the community again. So what have we gone? We've gone through running away with our hair on fire from like the place where we grew up to get away from an area that was too stressful, to realizing that it's completely barren and lonely in most places, to reconnecting electronically through social media and talking with people to effectively build the same thing that you built again that you just left, which is potentially a community that could have supported you to do stuff, except it's now a lot harder. So
the advice is
just do what you feel is right. It doesn't matter
go
what
with
you
that
do.
gut feeling.
You go with the gut feeling. Don't do anything other than what you feel is right. And you really have to think about that, because you know what? When your parents or your relatives or your friends tell you that that's not right, that's not you thinking. That's them doing it.
Right.
Do what you think is right. And if it feels really screwed up, you should at least consider their opinion, why they're saying that's a terrible idea. And if they can't articulate any other reasons other than selfish reasons, like, well, because I won't see you again, or whatever, you have to decide whether that's worth it to do that. If they say it because it's dangerous, and if they say you can't do that, you shouldn't do that because you harm yourself, ask why. And if they can't actually give you any rational reason, you're probably wrong. If they say something and it's like, oh shit, I didn't think of that, then mitigate it. Turn every negative thing that people say you shouldn't do that into a rational argument that you can work through. It'll just become a logistics problem. You can turn everything into a logistics problem, you're set. For the things that you can't, those are the emotional things that you really need to decide whether you're correct in your head about the approach. And I think what you're left with after that is the true desires of what you want to do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time.
Yeah, I know that was a long one.
No, part Part 1 of Life on the Road with the Family. We are officially 1 hour
and the sun set.
32 minutes